Welcome to Phantom Zoned, the podcast where we dredge the lakes of hell in search of the worst the cinematic world has to offer and put it on trial for its crimes against humanity. Should a film be found not guilty, it will be allowed to go free and frolic in the fields of life for all eternity for everyone to enjoy. However, if a film should be found guilty, then it will be jettisoned into the far, far reaches of space, a phantom zone, if you will. My name is Adrian Torres, and I'm your host. And joining me, as always, is my good, lovelorn, cousin-ish person, Scott Daly. How you doing, Scott?
What? What's that? I'm doing good.
I always try to switch it up on you, and I try to have it tie into to the episode.
You always throw me a curveball. I'm like sitting here ready to jump in and speak, and then at the last second, I hear what you say and start laughing uncontrollably. I'm doing good, Adrian. I'm really excited to talk about this very, very interesting film we watched this week.
And that's the end of our episode. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Wait, what?
It's gonna save everybody a lot of heartache and pain, I assume. So we have an interesting episode. Some of the things are going to go a little bit differently than they normally will, and that's just to try to experiment and have a larger discussion, partly because of the guests that we're going to have on, and at the same time, it's just how it feels with this movie. It's just, you'll understand when we try to explain it and get bored in the process, and everyone passes out, and the episode ends up being 4 hours because we literally took a nap for 2 hours in the middle of it. It might be that type.
It's not good radio. Definitely not good.
But what I did want to say is that this episode is also special because it's technically going to be the end of the series that we're doing. For the last couple months, we've had nothing but female guests on, basically to illuminate a whole bunch of very talented people, to give voice to a whole bunch of just females in general, because as I always say, we're just two guys talking about bad movies. That's something anybody can do. And we wanted to go out of our way and to highlight these individuals and to also further discussion, have new voices on because of everything that was happening and is still unfortunately happening, because today we're on Thursday, January 11th when we're recording this, and earlier today, there were even more stories that were coming out about James Franco and several other people. So we're still in the midst of everything, and that's why we felt that it was important to show support and to lend these voices. And so while I say that we're coming to an end of this part of it, that doesn't mean we're going to stop having female guests. We're basically at a point where the people that want to come on the show aren't going to be able to for like several weeks or a couple months, depending upon how their schedule susses out. And instead of just, taking a week off and trying to reschedule or having several episodes that are just Scott and I, we're just going to go back to having, guests in general and continue on with the show. And when we're able to have awesome female guests come on, they'll come on. We're not going to stop that. So I don't want anybody to think, we're closing the door on that.
Yeah.
It's just this continual series of having nothing but those people as guests. That part of the experiment is going to go away, just so we can have even more voices come on.
Yeah.
Because once you have so many guests in a certain way, people can start accusing you of the other side. And it's more so, no, we just want guests to come on in general.
Yeah.
And with that being said, we do have a very special guest tonight. She is a member of the Kansas City Film Critics Circle. She's written several articles for Birth Movies Death, and she also writes for Sojourners.net. Our guest tonight is Abby Olcese. Did I get the name wrong?
You got it right. You got it right. Good.
I was so worried at the end there. I'm like, I got this part right. I got the website. Now I'm going to tarnish the name.
Oh, no, you got it right. Actually, the website is, the organization is Sojourners. The website is sojo.net if people want to find it.
Oh, Sojo. Okay.
Yeah.
Sojo.net. I knew it was a .net. I knew that part at least.
That's the hardest part, really. So,
and part of the reason we brought you on is you are a film writer. You do write about films, critiques, essays, what have you. But at the same time, you have I'd say, unique skill set within that because of what you bring to the table. And since you mentioned that you write for Sojo.net, explain to people what's a little bit different about that site.
Sure. Sojourners is a progressive Christian social justice organization. They do all kinds of stuff from news coverage to faith and culture coverage, which is what I contribute to actual on-the-ground activism and fundraising for various kind of progressive faith-based causes. So that's kind of the angle there. A lot of the criticism that I write for the site kind of takes both a progressive angle and a faith-based angle. So when I watch a film, I'm looking at it kind of from a message standpoint, how it can be interpreted for a faith-based audience, as well as how it can kind of interpret themes of social justice and faith for people who are interested but not necessarily believers.
Correct. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on, because it's such an interesting standpoint. Because when you tell lots of people that, oh, I write for a site that's connected to, a faith-based or church organization, they have a very narrow mind of what that necessarily means.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And just like when I asked Abby to be on like a couple months ago, basically, there was a certain thing that you said to me right away, which was,
can we do a bad Christian movie, please?
Exactly. So it's not like I was setting out trying to do this, but it's something that Abby wanted to do. And that's what I thought was a very interesting perspective to go and do, because lots of times when people think of like people who are super religious or anything like that, they have a very narrow view of what that means in today's day and age. And it's just at the same time that if people hear that you write sometimes with a faith-based slant, they might think, oh, she's only going to write about certain movies. But if they go onto this website and they look you up, they're going to be seeing that you covered the new Star Wars movie. You covered 3 Billboards. You covered Thor Ragnarok. You also had a review on Whose Streets, which was a documentary from the street level view of people who were in Ferguson, Missouri. And so you're writing about everything. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to highlight that and be like, hey, you guys, here's the view that you're not normally getting when you're associating certain words with what pops up into your mind. And that's also why I wanted to mention that you also have written articles for Birth Movies Death, because that's a very big film website. And I think people wouldn't necessarily put those two together. And if they have a chance, and Scott, I don't know if you've read this one, but you have a great article that I want to draw attention to on Birth Movies Death about Mother. So if you wanted to give people a peek into what that article is about.
Yeah, thanks. I wrote about Mother kind of from a faith-based perspective for Birth Movies Death. Basically, the editor knew that I had a background writing stuff for Sojourners and asked if I would look at that movie just as a person of faith, how I feel about it. And I have kind of an interesting relationship to that movie because I agree with Darren Aronofsky up to a point. I think we have similar views on just kind of the base awfulness of humanity. But where he sees a lot of kind of anger and retribution, I, as a Christian, am more predisposed to see grace, which was not something that was really present in that film. But also, there's a lot of representation of many different kinds going on in that. And one of them is seeing Jennifer Lawrence's character as the feminine divine, which is a topic that, at least in progressive Christianity, I think is really interesting to talk about and doesn't get talked about enough. So I kind of looked at her character from that perspective and what Aronofsky's film might have to say about both the feminine divine and women as a whole.
Very much so. That's why I wanted to draw attention to that, because it's not an article that you normally get. And then at the same time, there was some of it was crazy, but some of it was really respectful in the comments when addressing basically that this article was on there, which was very cool to see, basically.
Yeah, it got a really nice response, which I really appreciated. There was some really good discussion going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you read that one, Scott?
I did. I read that when it was first published, not knowing
really?
that I'd get to talk to you months later. I loved the article. I really enjoyed it. I appreciated that perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah.
See, so that's why I wanted to have Abby on there, because it's not because I talk about it a lot with the majority of the guests that we've had on. Well, some of the guests that I've had on recently being from, the Kansas and Kansas City area, and that everybody, when they think about the region, they, just like if you mention just somebody being religious, they have the narrow view of it. It's one of those people who are like, oh, it's Kansas. What do they have to offer? There's
Sure.
something really there, and it's like, no, you don't understand. There's a whole bunch of, like, the film community is really big here. The people who are writing for all over the place of all different type of topics. And so that's why I wanted to highlight, people like you and be like, no, there's different people who are not only writing about films in different ways, but then there's filmmakers here that are starting to get on, the national stage to be like, hey, stuff is going on here. And, for people who are listening, who are in the Kansas City area or even outside of it in surrounding states, just to show how cool and big we're getting and everything, we have Panic Fest coming at the end of January. And they just put out the announcement basically last week of all the movies that they're getting. They're getting a couple premieres of movies. They're getting a couple movies that played at like Fantastic Fest and Fantasia and Toronto that are great. But then they're also having a ton of filmmakers are coming and a whole bunch of people who are doing Q&As and everything. And they're going to have the movie crypt with Joe Lynch and Adam Green are coming specifically because of how good of a response Adam Green got when he came last year and brought a movie that he basically said, I want to go back to Kansas City, and wanted to bring Joe Lynch along. So they're coming and doing that. And it Kansas City's starting to become a bigger movie area, and I want people to very much know that it's a serious thing, and it's not I'm joking about it.
That's cool. Yeah, we're kind of becoming a fertile ground, I think, for filmmakers and film appreciation, it's been kind of neat to watch that grow.
Yeah. Yes. But so the film that we decided, it basically came down to two. This was another special case too, where I don't think we've had this happen on the show so far, but I had a couple ideas that I was looking at. Abby had a couple ideas that she was looking at as well. And she had a great one that I want to see another time. So maybe we'll have to have you on in a couple months to do the other one that we saw that was called Slamma Jamma. That is, it sounds exactly like you would expect from a semi-incompetently made inspirational / religious sports movie that has one defining trait that Abby mentioned to me and had me go, okay, I'm interested in this, is that the film was shot by who?
Dean Cundy.
I don't know how that happens. Was he desperate?
I don't know. I think it was fairly recent, so it was sort of towards the end of his career. I mean, this is the cinematographer of such great films as Jurassic Park and the perennial classic Roadhouse, and somehow got roped into making this no budget Christian basketball sports movie.
Oh, man. So that. We might do that in the future, but there was a movie that I came across because I had a couple that sounded interesting, and there was one that stuck out to me. And Abby said that she saw that one too, and it was on her list. And so I said, okay, I'm going to leave it up to Scott. And I thought Scott was going to go for the Cundy choice. I thought that he'd find that interesting, but no. Instead, Scott went with the other one, and that's what we watched.
Oh, so this is all my fault.
It's a group effort.
That's right.
The movie has
ourselves.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
Straight to hell, basically. Unless we ask for last rites, but that's a different story. So the movie has two titles. One of them is Belle and the Beast, a Christian romance, and the other one is Beauty and the Beast, a Latter-day Tale. And if you can't tell from the title, it is exactly what you think. It is I'm using air quotes here for basically the entire description of a modern day updating of Beauty and the Beast. They use that in the loosest sense possible because I'm not sure if they've ever seen Beauty and the Beast, any of the variations. When you think of Beauty and the Beast, Scott, what if I say Beauty and the Beast? What comes to mind to you? Like, which version comes to your mind?
The Disney, the cartoon, of course.
Okay, Abby, if I say Beauty and the Beast to you, which version pops into your mind?
Yeah, definitely the animated version.
Oh man, I was hoping you were going to go with a different one. Come on, you guys.
Which one? Which one?
I'm not classy enough to go Jean Cocteau. I'm not there yet.
There you go. There you go.
That's not the first thing that's going to jump in my head.
Possibly, depending upon who you are and depending upon where you are in the film world, there's a chance that the Cocteau one's going to pop into your head. Depending upon who you're a fan of, there's a chance that the Ron Perlman TV show version is going to pop in your head.
If that pops into my head first, someone needs to check me into a mental institution.
Because you don't like Ron Perlman?
Have you seen that show?
Is Ron Perlman on the same level of Eric Estrada to you? Is that what's happening this time?
I guess so. I think it's just a ridiculous show.
To explain that to you, Abby, there was an episode last month in which this other individual we are speaking to decided to talk shit on Eric Estrada. And it was more that he felt that Eric Estrada was a non-entity.
Look, here's what happened. What happened is I made fun of Chips, the TV show, and Adrian lost his mind for some reason.
Because you were saying that you said that TV wasn't good back at that time, and I said that it was one of the big TV shows of the time because there was nothing for people to do but watch TV at home.
I didn't say TV wasn't good. I said that there was much less. I said TV now is better than TV was then.
And I said that they had a whole bunch of shows, and you said that all those shows back then were less quality.
I stand by my statement.
Okay. That's how it's going to be. What's your initial impression, you two, of Belle and the Beast? Okay, well.
Yeah, it's. I feel like there are like So Bad It's Good movies, particularly a lot of them end up having to be Christian films, unfortunately, that are like just entertainingly bad. And then there are ones like this that are just sort of like there, I guess. There's like a couple of defining weird things, like a couple of standout things, but just in terms of content, it just kind of ends up being vanilla pudding, basically, but like really cheap instant vanilla pudding.
Yeah. I didn't hate it as much as I thought I was going to. I picked this because I thought it looked worse than the other one. I thought it looked worse than Slamma-Jamma. So I'm like, all right, if we're gonna do this, let's go real bad. And I'm not going to sit here and say this was a good movie at all. It was not, but it was much less like rage-inducingly bad than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
It was just kind of like,
Yeah.
Do you want me to make you feel bad for a second, Scott?
Sure.
Supposedly the Slamma-Jamma movie is supposed to be unbearable.
Damn it.
Yes. So that's why I'm saying we might have to do that one in the future. So, Yeah,
I'm in.
I feel kind of the same way. As I described before we were actually recording, is that Belle and the Beast is a nothing burger. It makes tofu taste like prime rib. And that's because there's basically nothing of substance. There's points where people are talking, and the whole time I was staring at the movie, just wondering what the point of it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand like the context and the direction that they were trying to go in. And then I was yelling at the TV saying, no one talks like this to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
My favorite part was...
Or people like don't actually even talk to each other about shit in this movie.
Yeah.
My favorite part was, why do they call it a great room? Because it's big. End of scene. Scene over.
No. My favorite was the part directly before that when she's like, wait, the great room, I thought that was the room that he slept in. And then the Mrs. Havegood, who I hate with a fiery passion, says, that's a nice room, sweetie. No need to give it an ego.
Wait, what did the old lady do to you, Adrian?
It's the way it's bad bad community theater acting.
That's true.
Yes.
Was it her pie? Was it not good enough for you?
No. Okay. If you want me to be mean, she wouldn't have even be cast on Mama's. What was it?
Oh, Mama's Family.
Yeah, Mama's Family.
Oh man,
she wouldn't even have been on that show.
You're getting into family territory for me now, actually, because my grandpa was a huge Mama's Family fan. I never was, but yeah.
No, but okay. So you've seen Mama's Family.
Oh yeah.
I'm saying that she wouldn't even pass for an extra on that.
That is true. Yes.
And because that's Mama's Family's not bad. It just redefines what your concept of the word broad is.
That's true.
and Mrs. Havigood is just whacking weeds in a field of what she believes broad is supposed to be.
It's true. Yeah, she is.
That's kind of just about every one of these actors, though.
Yeah, they kind of all are. Although my favorite line, my personal favorite line, was like right at the beginning where her dad knocks over the vase and rich guy, his response is, "Do you know what a fine art costs?"
Yes. Oh.
It's like, no, and apparently you don't either because it's it's a vase.
Quick, think of some examples of fine art. I got none of it. I got nothing.
Did you catch what he said directly before that to the guy?
No, what did he say?
He goes, "No one tries to be an idiot. They just happen."
Oh, that's right. They just happen. They just appear, fully formed, like spores.
This costs the life of 10 people. 20 if they're like you.
Oh my god!
Throws the piece at him.
Him being a dick was rough. He was not very good at being a dick.
Yeah.
So, even though nothing goes through the film, so we'll speed over it basically as fast as we can. I had hope from like moment one, and that was just because we had looping piano music that I know Scott is so fond of.
Oh my god, the scores in these bad movies like just make my ears want to fall off.
They can only buy the samples. That's it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's just over and over again.
And that's because all this movie has is a couple looping samples, and then
some songs, some actual singing songs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're the type of songs that you would expect to be from like a 1993 really, really bad Christian music album.
Yeah, that's true. Like they're songs with lyrics, but the lyrics mean absolutely nothing. Like you listen to them and you're like, there's no meaning here.
Okay, I'm going to be very nice. I had a bad joke to make. I don't want to be tasteless, so.
Well, now I'm really curious. You're going to have to tell me off air.
I know.
Abby, I do apologize since you're out of everyone here, you're the most religious. I was going to say, well, it makes sense why these people are singing songs with their eyes closed.
Oh,
that's not that bad. I'm not offended.
Yeah. No, I didn't think it was that offensive. The spirit definitely isn't moving those people. So
Exactly. They think it is, but
they think it is. Oh yeah. They don't even.
That's a breeze in the room. So.
For a Christian movie, this movie mentions God very little. So I feel like it's not even all that offensive.
Well, we're going to get into that part because that has a bigger discussion that I'm curious to have in general. So the movie starts with this movie was made in 2007, which is weird when you view it on Amazon Prime because it says 2013. You know that it's 2007 because everyone has either a basic standard flip phone or a Motorola Razr. And you have to remember that once upon a time, a Motorola Razr was the height of cell phones. Technology has come a long way.
Yeah, I remember being jealous of my friends that had those things.
I know.
I can put 5 songs on my phone. So they have a sweeping shot over a mountain to open the film. But we never see like any mountains around where they are.
That's true. I think there's like one in kind of like the background, but I had forgotten that it was there at that point. It like surprised me.
Yeah, where is this movie supposed to take place? I mean, I'm guessing Utah, just because of the Latter-day Tale. I don't know.
I don't know. But they have God, what was it? They had an annoying narration that I don't know why it's there at the beginning, unless it's supposed to be like the fairy tale. Like, I know she does say once upon a time, but she only says like 2 to 3 lines, the narrator, who turns out to be Mrs. Havegood. Because I guess that they want to tie in with the Mrs. Why am I blanking on the name from the actual Beauty and the Beast?
Oh, Mrs. Potts?
Mrs. Potts.
Yeah.
That's who they're wanting to tie in and have her be, but
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be there. And like the entire reason that the movie is set in motion is because this guy, Eric Landry, everybody in town calls the Beast, because they have a whole bunch of rumors about him and everybody thinks he's a dick. And we do witness him being a dick to his assistant, who he fires / she quits. And then there's an electrician / repair guy who knocks over the vase, like we mentioned. And he says that he's going to call the repair guy's boss. And he's like, no, I can't lose my job. I'm taking care of my kids. And he's like, well, leave my house. I'm so mad. I'm still going to call your boss in the morning. And so his daughter hears about this and says, I'm going to go have a talk with this guy, and basically agrees to indentured servitude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she does.
Pay off the cost of the vase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's not. Well, but he says that she's going to work for him to pay off the debt when he says that she's done enough.
Right.
So there's not like a monetary value, because fine art is priceless.
That's right, because nobody knows what a fine art costs.
not
20,
even he.
20 people's lives, apparently. It's interesting.
How much is that per year or per lifetime?
Who knows?
Oh,
The beast is mysterious. The interesting thing to me is that she has a job already. She works in an orthodontics office. She's also going to school for her MBA. And he's like a full-time consultant, and he's just like, well, whenever you're not at your other job or at school, you're going to be here with me. And I was like, that would be, as like, if I needed to get stuff done during this time, like that would not be an arrangement I'd be okay with at all, as like from either side.
Well, this is the type of a decision that's made from a guy who's made like a beautiful plate for breakfast and goes, why don't you make me something I'll actually eat? Yeah,
that breakfast looked so good. Why would you?
Good.
He's like, okay, I'll just make you a bagel. That's a downgrade. Like, I don't understand.
Well, my thought is that this lady's been working for him for an unspecified period of time. And I'm like, does she do this every morning? Does she make this goddamn breakfast for him every morning, thinking occasionally he's just going to give in and he's going to eat it? Yeah. And every morning she spends an hour and like 45 minutes in making this. And then he's like, what the hell's wrong with you?
The trash bag is just filled with beautifully cooked eggs, bacon, and hash browns.
Exactly. I do think, like, at least watching the early scenes of this, when they're like showing how awful of a person he is, like it gave me like a weird sense of maybe like what it might be like to work in the Trump White House. Like, just, you have this guy who's just like wandering around and yelling at people kind of incoherently for reasons that really only he understands. And his main goal is to basically just like dislike what everybody does and to expect things of people that nobody understands.
I must have fallen asleep because I don't remember the scene where he drank 12 Diet Cokes.
That's in the cutscenes. If you get the DVD, it's in the special features.
Ah, there we go.
I don't want to spend money on that. No, thank you.
You don't.
So she's continually, she comes for several days trying to wear him down, and she's getting upset. There's a really weird scene where he's in the spa room, which looks like a living room with a hot tub built into it.
Yeah.
And he asks for a book from his nightstand, which I wrote down the title because it's called Glorious Accidents.
Oh, that's right.
It doesn't come back in any way, but they make sure that you can see the spine. And then he tells her, hey, my library's in the other room. Feel free to take any of the books. And if you look at the shot, there's like a couple almanacs, a whole bunch of random magazines, and then a Bible.
Uh-huh.
And of course,
of
she's going
course-
to take the Bible.
Of course. It's the nicest thing on there. So, and then he chastises her for taking the Bible.
And throws it in the jacuzzi.
Throws it in the jacuzzi.
To which she gets really upset and says, I don't know you or your reasons, and you don't know me or mine. Please don't be disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure. I was like, I understand what you're trying to say, but that's not what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And then his response is, I haven't cared about what God thought for years. Which is,
Tragic
it's
past.
great.
Tragic past end.
It's coming back. It's going to bite you.
And his tragic past, of course, is that his wife, he was married 10 years earlier, and his wife died. And his wife died because the tire hit the road wrong.
I forgot about that. I think I literally, in my notes, it's all caps, and I wrote down, what?
Yes.
That does not happen.
That was his explanation.
It just hit. It
The
just
tire
hit the road
wrong. And then she dies because she's out in the middle of the road and there's no one to get help. So he goes back into the car and prays. And when nothing happens, that's when he decides that he doesn't believe in God anymore, so that he's going to drink. And so he becomes an alcoholic, and then mentions that he, at some point, we're not given like an explanation why, but when he's really drunk at some point, he decides that he needs to get help. And he checks himself in to a rehabilitation clinic and has been sober for the last 5 years, even though everyone in town still calls him a drunk.
Right.
Yeah, this felt to me like something that like the movie wanted him to be an alcoholic, but like
Yes.
it wouldn't, like showing someone drink on screen would not fall under their like what they're allowed to show, so they just didn't do it. So they wrote their way around it. I don't know.
At one point, she's like, "Oh man, that must have been difficult." And he's like, "Well, it took hard work, but I got through it." And she's like, "Yeah, but still, the weight's still got to be there on you." Like, he hasn't had a drink in 5 years, and there's several times where she's still pushing him to be like, "Well, maybe you're not completely there."
Yeah.
And so, Abby, you can tell me how you feel about this, or unless it's something that it's like too out of your wheelhouse because of not knowing how these people may actually be, is the way the movie presents it. Because literally, we'll go over a couple characters, but nothing happens in this film. And anytime anything does happen, it's literally on a dime. Like, there's a day that he's a dick to everybody, and then he catches the cold, and that's when he apologizes to her.
Right.
Like there's no semblance of how he came to the decision. It's just, "Oh, I've got a tummy ache. By the way, I'm really sorry for being an asshole about everything."
It's because she's so nice and she's got that little dimple.
But the movie, its climax basically is that he's in a terrible place. He thinks that he's lost her, feels that his life is going to go down the drain, and he sees the Bible and he sees the bottle of alcohol, and he leaves. And after smashing the glass on the shadow box that has the alcohol, and then standing there for literally about 30 seconds and not moving, and then walking out of frame, he's seen by the water, and he's holding onto the bottle, and she thinks he's going to drink, and he ends up chucking it into the water, and then mentions that he's reaffirmed his place with God. And so kind of the way that it feels like they're going about it is, even though he stopped drinking and he did go to the rehab clinic, they weren't actually acknowledging that he was no longer an alcoholic until he did it with the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, I think
partially. You go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. I think another, like, a general issue that I had with the movie is that it's not even very clear in its redemption story, whereas even a lot of bad Christian movies would have made that very clear. This one, I don't even think that he says he doesn't believe in God. At one point, he says, like, God doesn't want me to be happy.
Yeah.
So, like, he does believe in God. He just believes that God hates him.
Yeah, he's just mad at God.
It's more so. It's one of the lighter versions because, I mean, there's rare times when they have somebody who's like, I don't believe in God, but it's always more so like they've turned their back on God, and so that's how he presents it, is that he like at one point he says that he doesn't really believe in him at that point, and then the redemption explanation at the end is, you're right, I was never alone, just wasn't listening to God, which doesn't track with what he says earlier.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily track with what he says earlier, but that's definitely part of like that's a very familiar narrative for sure.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But it like that's what was a little bit weird about it, because there's like they still have like lots of people and stuff who are addressing, the fact that like in their eyes he's still a drunk, and it's like, well, I'm pretty sure if in this seemingly small town that knows everything about this guy, that they should know that he did go to rehab. So it was a little bit weird.
Yeah, he's a well enough known figure around town that I feel like a large chunk of that story, including the rehab part, like would be common knowledge.
Yeah.
But then we wouldn't get to learn about it. So I don't know.
and then we couldn't have weird guy Craig making fun of him constantly.
Or as I like to call him, hey.
Which I want to talk about Craig for like 20 minutes because this is the weirdest character in the story.
Because that's the thing about the movie. It's that there's so many scenes where like nothing's happening. Like you've got the really bad falling in love montage, but that's like the only semblance that we have that they're falling in love.
It was anything. A montage, Adrian. Done. You do a montage. They're standing close to each other. They look at each other. Boom. Love.
And then they don't talk about anything.
Why should they have to? They just went through a montage. They know.
Well, done. That's true. That's true, because 2 scenes later they're going to dress like they're going to prom as opposed to a business dinner.
Yeah, as opposed to a very awkward and inappropriate business dinner.
That was so weird.
If you watch this like through the lens of everything that's happened in the last year, it's just a movie full of inappropriate action. Yeah.
But considering that the CEO of the company goes, "This is my date, Rachel."
Right.
And then one of my favorite tropes when it comes to like bad Christian movies, and I feel a little bit bad about the person who's writing it, because that they're probably super happy with what they've done.
Sure.
The person who wrote this knows nothing about business jargon, and that they're trying to put on like their best face, because there's a moment where you hear Eric on the phone and he goes, "Listen," or I gotta find the quote, but he makes a comment about the middle managers being abysmal at this company, and that they need to think about retraining them, or else they need to adjust their quarterly figures.
Yeah, which is
just a bunch of buzzwords.
And this is the guy who he has the business dinner later with, who were like, "No, we like your ideas of the overhaul and everything," and then Belle mentions, "Well, I think that maybe instead of firing people, that you should retrain the people you have." And they're like, "Wait, what? This is brand new news." And I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure he mentioned that on the phone to you."
Yeah.
And now he's acting like it's a brand new concept.
He's in love with her. He just wants to give her credit.
Oh. Also, but before we get on to Craig, it was probably one of my favorite moments of the movie where I'm like, I don't think anybody understands anything that's happening in this film, is because there's a part where, to become a better assistant, she just yells at him and says, "I can do more work." And he goes, "Okay, sure." And so he has her start reading reports, and then is like, "Oh, well, it seems like you're getting a hang of this. Is there any chance that you could do some revisions on the latest draft that I'm working on for one of these proposals?" He comes and sees her, and he's like, "Oh, you're still working on this? Well, let me take a look at it." He takes a look at her note, or at her what's supposed to be her revisions, and her revisions are basically like a grade school teacher critiquing your work.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you know what he was asking? He was asking you to rewrite this, not say, you should be more passionate here.
Mean here.
You seem like
rude.
Mean.
Yeah.
And I was like, does she actually know what's happening?
No. Although, given the amount of work that he actually does compared to the amount of time he spends lounging around the mansion, I feel like she has a better handle on his job than he does.
Yeah, probably.
Like, barely. Marginally.
But he's got all the color-coded binders.
He's got all the color-coded binders. He's got all of the files, which he drops on the stairs in that. It's like, it's the perfect, has this ever happened to you moment where he's just like walking down the steps and they just like fall out of his hands and you're just like, oh, you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's the climax of the movie. The climax of the movie is she's not there. He walks down the stairs.
Right.
And I literally I wrote it. Is it okay if I use coarse language for a second?
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I literally wrote, so I apologize for the yelling here. Oh, fuck, the color-coded files are all mixed up. Get me fucking tequila or God, whichever is nearer. Oh, shit, the tequila's on the shelf and God's right here. Tequila it is. That's literally the climax of the movie.
It is. That's how you know you're doing really badly, is when you can't even hold the folders together. It all just falls apart.
I wouldn't be surprised if they needed to like shoot an infomercial for a file folder system, and they just used the same scene for both of them.
Try binder clips. What?
No, it's actually a commercial for a local business that it's a hiring agency basically, and they're like, "Do you need an assistant?"
You'll
fall in love with them.
So
exactly.
So to be slightly positive on the movie for a second.
Okay.
The thing that didn't annoy me as much as it normally would in these Christian movies sometimes is I feel like sometimes they get very lectury. Like it just stands there lecturing you, lecturing characters and therefore the audience on how to be a better Christian. And I feel like the movie didn't really do that a lot. And I appreciated that. Like the movie kind of set itself up as like one of the things you hear a lot in Christianity is this idea that if you follow these virtues, if you present yourself as a true Christian person, you will be this light that will draw people to you, and people will see how you behave and see you're nice and friendly and live this way, and people will be drawn to that. And I think that's kind of what this movie was saying, is that she just by like being the person she is and living the way she does around this guy, like changes him. And that is a much better way of spreading this message than you're doing this wrong, you need to do this, you need to do this. And I appreciated that as clunky and like badly acted as it was. I appreciated that part of it.
That's a surprisingly mature approach, actually. I think you're giving it a little more credit than I would have, but I do like that idea.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the cynical side of me, but while they do have that at the same time that they are getting close and everything, part of the reason why she doesn't like fully commit to him or be like, he's a guy I could be with, is because he doesn't have God in his life.
Right.
Like that's part of what's holding her back. And that's why most of when things do get serious, her conversation turns to, well, what about God?
Yeah.
And like that's her testing him. And it's like, I do really like you, but you kind of gotta have God as your wingman for me to get to you.
Yeah, but I think that's a belief that a lot of people actually do hold, though, that like I can't get in a romantic relationship with you if you don't share my beliefs. So I get that.
Well, unless you're Craig.
Unless you're Craig.
Well, yeah.
Can we talk about Craig? Let's
talk about Craig.
Let's talk about Craig. Because at the same time, while the movie does posit the whole, it is very much a religious / Christian movie, and it's one of those that you have to have those tenets to be with another person. They have Craig that the movie simultaneously embraces and shuns.
Right.
Oh my God.
Which is, we'll just dive into it. Abby, how do you feel about Craig?
he terrifies me. He's sort of like the geeky Gaston character.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, had they actually gone with like the Gaston characterization where they're like, this person is a victim of toxic masculinity, that would have been fine. But no, instead they present Craig as just like this doofus who's always around and is just like, I am here for you whenever you want me. But the things he does are creepy as hell. Like there's a part where he calls her and he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just studying. And like, I could tell from watching a million stalker movies, like this guy is outside your house.
Outside her house.
Get out. Yes. And he is outside her house. But like the music that's playing in the background when he does that is like this charming kind of, clunk-a-dunk-a-dunk. Yeah. Like, oh, this poor guy can't catch a break. Like, no, this is bad behavior.
That was so uncomfortable because the ice cream date scene, which, like, first of all,
where did the ice cream come from? Where'd the ice cream come from?
But he doesn't know her at all. They met for 5 seconds. They were supposed to go out together. She canceled, and then he's just at her house and like want to go for ice cream. And for some reason, Belle shut him down. Like tell him no. Stop like leading him on. Like she never like why did you agree to go to get ice cream with him?
Hey Scott.
Huh?
Why are you yelling?
Because it's ridiculous.
Hey Scott. You don't need to yell. I know you. I know the real you.
God,
you're great, Scott. You don't need to yell at this. If we could be together, you wouldn't need to yell, Scott.
Oh my God. The part where he's like, 2 jobs and class, 3 things. You just need to get married and just relax. No. And I was like, Craig.
Craig. What you need is a boyfriend or husband.
And then he reaches over and sticks his spoon in her ice cream. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here, Craig. You're
exactly. The whole time, just like, no.
The next thing he said creeps me out even more. He goes, I know that you might not trust your feelings, but you can trust mine.
Oh, yeah. It's terrible. It's terrible. And then, like, I feel so bad for the actor. Like, he can't help the way he looks. But it's just, he's got these big bug eyes. Yeah. And so when he says something really intense like that, and then his eyes get intense, it looks like he is about to murder her.
Yep.
Yes.
And it freaks me out every time.
I just want to...
Craig has an open mouth smile that belongs on a murderous clown.
I just wanted him to admit that he stalked her to find where she lived. I wanted her to say, "Hey, how did you know where I live? Did my friend tell you?" No?
Well, her friend, who's a total enabler, her friend is the worst. At one point, her friend is like, I know how my cousin can be. And like, if you know how your cousin can be, tell him to get the fuck out. Like,
and then she invites him she invites Belle to breakfast with him the next day after saying, I know how he can be.
Yeah. After she's basically rejected him seriously and said, I'm not interested. And her friend's like, I totally am fine with that. And then the next day she's like, no, I invited him just one more time, tell him again, and then we'll be fine. Like, no, it's never going to be over with you, is it?
Yeah, and like you guys said, though, I think he would have been fine as a character if the movie made it very clear that this behavior was inappropriate.
Exactly,
but it really didn't.
No. And the weird thing about that is because of the fact that, like, because he's the, like, far off religious side, but he's vocalizing things that she feels, which is why it comes off as weird in the movie, because for him it's like, no, this is wrong. But because she feels the same way and she's not as aggressive, that makes it okay. Because he's got the part where he says, no, I want to be with you. I feel that we're supposed to be together. God wants me to be with you. You're the one. And it's like, no, you're super, super creepy. But then when she says it when she has the feelings towards Eric, it's okay because she's not fucking creepy.
Right. Yeah. Because she's wholesome and she's got a dimple.
Exactly. But now you mentioned, Abby, that you said that you didn't feel like it was toxic masculinity from his point.
Like, it wasn't being explicit that the way that he's behaving and the things that he's doing are wrong. Whereas, like, in the in the Disney version, in the versions that we are used to watching, the character of Gaston is shown from the beginning as being a jerk. So this is not the guy that you're supposed to root for. But with Craig, we never really get that.
Yeah, it treats it like he really didn't do anything wrong until he poses as the beast to make the phone call.
Yeah, until he makes the phone call.
Yeah, which I thought was confusing then when like they're shutting out Eric and I'm like, you could have like tried to figure out why she was upset. And
exactly. Like it could have been solved very easily.
Yeah. I hate that conflict.
I like how he, I thought it was funny. He has to go to like, he waits weeks and weeks, then shows up to the house to find out that the dad no longer has a job, and then goes home and then decides to call. And it's just like, you should have been able to put like 2 to 2 together a while ago.
Yeah, right. Conflict that can easily be solved by the characters just talking to each other for more than 3 seconds is like my pet peeve. I can't stand it. I'm just like, just talk to each other.
And then she does it 2 seconds later once the dad gets his job back. And like the dad's a jerk about it too, because like she comes home and they're like, the kids are like, oh, hey, dad got his job back. And he's like, yeah, I guess he felt guilty. He called back. And I'm like, dude, if you got your job back, they told you, hey, he called in and said that he never made that call and somebody else was posing as him. You're just being a dick now about it. Wouldn't you be curious and be like, this is a little confusing. Who could it be? Could it be that really creepy guy who's always like just right outside our driveway every night?
Yeah, crazy old Maurice didn't really not seem into the whole Belle and Beast relationship.
For real, he was not the father he needed to be. Honestly, I think every man in this movie is trash. Like they're all horrible people. Like Craig is creepy trash. Her dad is just sort of sad sack trash, and Eric is like Trump trash. He's just it's awful. They're all awful.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the little brother's also awful?
Oh, he's terrible. All he can do is just mimic his sister.
Yeah.
That could be a learning disability. Like that's all I know.
That's true.
He could be a little slow. So
remember,
like he's not even annoying little brother from Teen Witch bad. Like he's just bad.
Remember when the movie takes like a 10-minute tangent to have Eric go to Kelly's principal's office and talk to the principal?
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on?
And then the principal is like, she's usually such a good student. Like, no, she's not. She, in the scene earlier, she's like, I got a C on the test, but I'm going to do okay because of the curve. Like, she's an average student at best.
No, and not only that, but then the principal himself was really creepy with like the speech that he gives at the end when he's like, well, what we see as being like the main problem with kids at our school is that the parents don't listen. So are you spending time with your daughter? Maybe spend time with your daughter and listen to your daughter. Here at our school, we listen to the students. That's something I take lots of pride in.
Yeah. There's no consideration to the fact that the kid's mom died, however long ago. I don't know how long ago it's supposed to be, but her mother died. Her sister's been sold into indentured servitude. Like she's got some stuff going on at home, and
she's working some things out.
Yeah,
we're talking about a family that's getting by on basically one person's salary, is deciding to buy store-bought rotisserie chicken and then take it out of the oven. Did you see that?
I did not.
No,
I
did not.
That.
Oh my God.
When they're having dinner at the beginning and they pull the chicken out of the oven to put it on top with also like some type of sauce that they pull out from the oven. But right next to the right of them on the countertop is the little bag that rotisserie chickens come in from the grocery store.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
Well, to be fair, they don't just have one income. They have her orthodontist assistant job where she takes files and puts them on shelves and then removes the file from the shelf and then puts the file back
she
on the
works
shelf.
She works at a orthodontics office.
Oh no.
I'm sorry. When people do stuff like that, I'm like, do you hear the way that you're talking? Is this the only shot that you had, or is this what somebody wrote and you're like, well, I guess that's what I got to remember?
I would guess that they didn't do too many takes of the shots in this movie.
Yeah.
The movie that Emmy kept on yelling, why is the camera out of focus? And I go, no, sweetie, it's not out of focus. They just don't have enough money for a good camera.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And like to speak to your like, this is what I had to remember thought. Like I had a drama teacher in high school who was that way, who would like tell you that this was the way to say the line, and like I knew it was incorrect. And so there is like that kind of mentality. But when it's a movie that, you know, it costs money to make, I feel like you've got a little more skin in the game to actually get it right. And so when that happens, it frustrates me even more.
Well, since this is a bad movie, and we're going to do the vote now, and then we're going to have a slight discussion afterwards. If you're okay with that, Abby?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So, Scott, we're going to start with your vote.
Yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm going to vote guilty here, but I am very surprised at how this movie did not make me as angry out as I was expecting going into it. So while I am going to vote guilty, it's a very light guilty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I can see that. All right, Abby, just to go over, if you're not sure, not guilty means that you're fine with people watching it. You think they should watch it. They might have some fun and how bad it is. Guilty means that it's being shot off into space. It's basically as if that movie never existed. No one has any possible way of ever seeing it ever again.
Okay. Yeah, I'd vote guilty because it's like, for me, it wasn't even really entertainingly bad. It was just straight up bad.
Yep, that's how I feel about it too. It's guilty. It's already non-existent to me while I watched it. Mm-hmm. I would have rathered either a more offensive or more ineptly made bad film to try to like get on the side of that, and that's, I feel bad saying, you know, guilty for that because it doesn't have a lot, but when it comes to when people think of both bad Christian movies or just Christian movies in general, you want it to have something of substance. You either want it to be so preachy because it's trying to reach a message that it just becomes absolutely ridiculous and that no one's a fan of it, or you want something that can have a decent message without being preachy that people can enjoy in general, you know, because there is a group of people that these movies call to. And so you want, if this is the only type of movie that they're watching, that you'd hope that it would be something that they'd be able to enjoy instead of being just like mindless drivel. You know, you don't want that for anybody. So as we mentioned before with this movie, you know, with the religious slant and everything like that, my wife afterwards asked me, you know, what I thought about the movie because she was laughing at parts of it, and she goes, "You know what? I liked it. It wasn't a good movie, but I could definitely laugh at how ridiculous it was." And she asked me how I felt, and you know, I had to be honest. It was like, I don't feel really anything about it. And she asked an interesting question and said, "Do you think that you would feel more if you more about this movie if you were more religious?" And it took an interesting turn in my mind because I couldn't just give a simple answer. And while I'm not religious myself, and I'm more of a spiritual person, yes, I've read the Bible. I've read several different versions of the Bible. I've read a whole bunch about a whole bunch of different religions. And that's why I view myself as being more, you know, spiritual as opposed to holding on to a certain religion. But I'm not somebody who's ever going to judge anybody upon their beliefs. My view is that I'm fine with whatever you want to believe in, as long as you don't get to a point where you tell somebody that they're wrong because they don't believe with what you believe in, and that the only way that they can be a friend of yours is if you step in line with them. That's not okay, because, you know, we're three people talking right now. I can guarantee you that our beliefs are different, but that doesn't mean that we can't be friends. But when I was thinking about this movie, and I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, is I was viewing it in a different way. Because to just say, if I was religious, would I necessarily like this movie? Well, I think that's putting too wide a net on it. Because while it does say a Christian romance, people have to remember that if you say Christian, that's a very wide and loose term. Mm-hmm. The fact that this movie has the second title of a latter-day tale, it's pinpointing what subsection of Christianity this movie is going towards. It's going for, you know, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's a very, very specific field right there. So you can't necessarily say, if I'm a Christian, am I necessarily just going to like this movie on the principle of being a Christian? But then at the same time, the conversation that I was having with my wife that I'm very interested onto your points again is the fact that there is a whole group of people, not necessarily just the people who are for, Latter-day Saints, but for different types of Christians that movies like this or certain ones that are geared towards them are the only type of movie that they necessarily see. And they won't go out of that wheelhouse to go to the theater to see lots of mainstream movies because it doesn't fit directly into the beliefs that they have. And that's why there was the studio that decided that they wanted to take the profit gamble, and I'm using air quotes on profit gamble because it's very much what it was when they put out the animated movie The Star last year, because they knew that they were going to be able to get lots of these people who mostly predominantly stick with watching faith-based films to go to a regular theater. So I'm interested to hear what your guys' thought on that is.
I can let you go first, Abby, since you're the the writer.
Okay. I'm still kind of turning that over in my brain. I like this movie is a little bit different in that I feel like it doesn't go very hardcore necessarily in terms of the preachiness or even really the specificity of belief, apart from just like believe in God and things will be okay.
Yeah.
Do they even say Jesus? I can't remember.
I don't even think they do. I think they just say
no,
God.
Yeah, they say God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that's it.
That's it. So I feel like even from a faith-based perspective, it comes off as lukewarm just because it doesn't really commit. But yeah, it's, I think Christian movies in general are, there are a lot of people out there who, like Alyssa Wilkinson, who writes for Vox, is one of them. She can write about like the foibles of Christianity in film and particularly evangelical Christian movies.
Yes.
Way better than I ever have, mostly because I think she has more direct experience with that. But it's a weird kind of place where like challenges are not really a thing that you want to find in your entertainment. I think if you're in a certain particular mindset of believing, like that's not where I go at all. I want to be challenged. I want to learn stuff. But it's just kind of, it's a safe space. It's a place where your beliefs can be affirmed and where you can like feel like you can use it as even like a outreach tool for your friends. I feel like that's kind of, it's sort of a dual purpose of studios realizing that there's a market in which to make money, and some people who are like legit looking at it from a ministry perspective of this is a way we can kind of get butts in pews.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because like I said, and that's why I was curious if you agreed, but there is nowadays that whole subsect that's focusing on that because they know that they're going to, and the reason why I say that is because I do have family members who are like that, who are super, super religious, and anytime that they talk about movies, it's only that like that's all they're seeing. That's all people in part of that family is allowed to do, is that it has to be a faith-based movie or television program. That's it.
Yeah.
That's that. Like they don't like basically trying to like going out and seeing 3 billboards is not something that's going to happen to them until they get to college and they feel like that's rebelling basically just because it doesn't want to stay out of that that grouping. And you mentioned Alyssa Wilkinson, which was great because I was going to mention that if people want to read an interesting article that goes into this, is that she has an article on Thrillist that's called "I'm a Christian and I Hate Christian Movies."
Yeah, I've referenced that at least a couple of times in my Sojourners reviews. She's really good at like pinpointing exactly the things that she dislikes about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always find it interesting with like, because we all watch lots of movies. Mm-hmm. And there's been plenty of films that have like religious and Christian slants to it that have been made for mainstream audiences that I think still get a good message across from the characters, but it feels like they try to go too often into, as you guys mentioned, the too preachy.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that's something that's tough for them to get away from nowadays? Because like anytime that you see, because they're starting to try to grab people who have names and like B, even if it's like B actors, and I don't mean like D or C, like Stephen Baldwin being in a whole bunch, or Tom Berenger on whatever, or sorry, Corbin Burnson on whatever crusade he's going on right now. Which is weird. If you don't know about it, just look on YouTube for any of the trailers for his movies, and it's.
Has he made more than just Christian Mingle? Because that's the only one that I'm aware of.
He made one that was called Rust, which is about a guy who used to be a priest and lost his way and moved away from home after somebody after a family was killed in a house that burned down. But then he is drawn back to town and thinks that maybe the person who was charged with the murder didn't actually do it, and is fighting with God and has to reclaim his faith to help solve the mystery.
Yeah, I mean, so
discuss it. Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, I don't know how to comment on that. I haven't seen that, but I think people don't like to be challenged, like as a whole in general, and I think when you start to get to faith and spirituality, that amplifies that. So I completely agree that there's a problem that a lot of these faith-based movies are not willing to are safe spaces that aren't willing to have anyone like challenge or examine or investigate their spirituality, their faith, and their beliefs. And I mean, for me personally, I was raised Catholic. I still consider myself Christian. And if I have kids, I'm going to raise them as Christians. And I want them to watch all kinds of movies. And I want them to watch all kinds of movies that have spiritual undertones to them too, because I think you learn something, and you test your belief, and you challenge yourself. And it's a way to learn about the things that you believe and really find a way to get to a place where you understand and you are comfortable in what your belief and what your faith is. I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it provides a way of identifying with new ideas and forms of belief that you weren't like previously aware that you identified so wholly with. It provides space for conversation. I know I've had really awesome conversations with my parents after watching movies like The Mission, which I think we talked for like a good hour and a half when I was in high school, just about all the stuff that meant. It can provide really formative experiences.
Are we talking about Roland Joffe?
Yes, yeah. In fact, I have the poster for that movie on the wall right behind me right now. So
I love that movie. I was actually gonna bring that up. That was gonna be one of the three, because I was gonna ask you guys quickly if you'd seen three movies basically, and how it feels. And I guess I should technically pick a fourth one, because the mission's kind of similar. But the three that came, I guess we'll be honest and we'll say four, is of course there's the 10 Commandments that comes to everybody's mind, of course, because if you're somebody who studies film at all, at some point you're going to see the 10 Commandments. It's one of those things that you have to do. You know, there's several of those old biblical epics that if you're a student of film, you have to come across. You have to see. You're going to see Ben-Hur. You're going to see the 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. Depending upon like where you fall, you might see The Robe, or you might see The Greatest Story Ever Told, just because they were the big pageant films of that
Right.
time. And it didn't matter if you were religious or not. The actors that you had in it and the directors that you had involved and the fact that they were in CinemaScope and Cinerama and they were big event movies that you were going to be entertained and you could also bring your family that was religious because you're like, hey, they're talking about Bibles. There you go. It's got everything you want. But with the world moving away from that there's a couple movies from the 80s and then, of course, one today that stick in my mind. The Mission, you mentioned, which is, for people who don't know, it's a movie from 1986 by Roland Joffe. It stars, and it's a reason why it's like, if you haven't seen this movie, hey, we can throw a couple names in here, and you're probably going to go check it out. But Roland Joffe, people might know, who did the 90s Scarlet Letter. He did The Killing Fields. He did Fat Man and Little Boy. He did lots of movies, years and years ago, and he would make big pictures. But The Mission has Robert De Niro. It's got Jeremy Irons. It's got Aidan Quinn. It's got a very young Liam Neeson.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Liam Neeson ties into the other movie that we've had recently with Silence coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, of course, was able to get such a big release because it was Martin Scorsese's big passion project for years and years and years, who's a devoutly religious individual.
Yeah, but he's the exact kind of religious person I like. A person that is clearly wrestling with their faith and is questioning it. And like between Last Temptation of Christ and Silence, you can see him like wrestling with the parts of his faith that he has trouble reconciling. And I think that's great. And I really loved both those movies.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Last Temptation, Abby?
I love Last Temptation, actually. I find it very interesting. I remember finding it interesting, like, as a high schooler, when I wasn't even sure that it was a movie I was supposed to be watching. Like, I wasn't sure.
It's a sticking point. It's a sticking point with lots of people.
Oh yeah. And I understood completely why it was a sticking point. But I'm a person who's really, like, obviously I love movies and I write about movies a lot. So I'm a person who's really moved by narrative. And one of the things that I find compelling about Christianity is that narrative. And so I really like art that explores parts of, like, really dramatic parts of the Bible from a way that makes those characters more human and more complex and helps me identify with them more. Like there's a comic book series that just started last December called Judas that does a really amazing job of it. It's basically like the afterlife experiences of Judas Iscariot after he hangs himself. So it splits between his experiences in hell and also his experiences with Christ, trying to struggle with his doubts that led him up to betraying him, and then also, like, what is the point of my having done all this? Why am I here? It's really interesting. Anyway, I know it's not a movie, but I would for sure recommend that anybody who's interested in stuff like Last Temptation tries to check it out.
I'll definitely check that out. That's awesome.
And here's the last one that I wanted to mention, because I don't know if people don't like it anymore, if it's just for some people they consider it old or what, but one that I saw when I was growing up, and it's one that sticks out in my mind for when it comes to that elements of people struggling with their faith, but then also people whose faith is basically everything to them, into their being, that it affects everything they do in life, is Chariots of Fire.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. My experiences with Chariots of Fire are kind of limited, actually. It's a movie that my parents really love, that my mom really loves, especially. And like, I remember watching it growing up and not being that into it. But I think it's something I should definitely revisit as an adult, because it comes up in churches a lot, and for good reason. It's a really compelling story.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the sides to it that I think is the way that it presents these two characters on different sides of the coin with different religious backgrounds. it never says that one of them is correct and one of them is incorrect. They have different reasons for why they're channeling their faith one way or another, but it just presents themselves as just people. You know, they're runners. They have this religious background, and then they're people. It's never a point that this person's good because they're this religion and this person's bad because of that. But it's just an examination of how people's religion can influence the way that they live their life one way or another. And so I always found that was really interesting because it was open to having that discussion and just letting you examine it as in this is this person's life as opposed to this is correct or this is incorrect. Scott, have you seen that one?
Yeah, but I think it's been so long. I was a kid. I really don't remember it. So I really need to revisit it.
It won 4 Academy Awards, Scott.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I didn't like it. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm. There's another one that I would recommend. Places in the Heart, the Sally Field movie. Yeah, it's a gorgeous film, and I recently just watched it with my parents because it was on like TCM, and my mom has talked about the ending scene of that so many times, and so we finally got to watch it, and like none of us got through it with a dry eye. And it's just like it's the story of like Sally Field is a woman living in the Dust Bowl with her kids and her husband. Her husband's a sheriff. Her husband is killed early on in the film in an accident with a young black boy, and that black boy is then lynched by other members of the town in revenge. And meanwhile, Sally Field has to get along with all of these kids, her kids, and grow a cotton crop. And she's never had to do all of it by herself. And so she, with the help of a bunch of other people in the town, they all come together and they all grow a successful cotton crop. And they have to contend with all of like the racism and horrible stuff in their town. But the final scene is like, it's just such a beautiful depiction of, for me, what communion is, because it's everybody together in the church. And they listen to the preacher who does the, God is love passage from the Bible. And then they pass the communion plate around. And as the communion plate goes around, you see characters who have either left the town, characters who have been there to the end of the film, and also characters who have died. And so, like, the very last part of it is, like, Sally Field, who passes the plate to her husband, who has died, to the boy who accidentally killed him and then was killed. Oh, so wow. It becomes, like, it's amazing. Like, it's this beautiful, really moving moment of magical realism that kind of ties the whole thing together.
Yeah. And it's, awesome. I feel terrible, because I can remember other stuff that the guy did, but now I'm trying to remember who else is in it. Ed Harris is in it, right? Yeah,
Ed Harris, John Malkovich, Danny Glover. Yeah, it's got a really good cast.
And the guy who directed it, some people would know his work, because I always remember him because Places in the Heart always kind of feels like for this guy is that it's the other movie that people forgot he did.
Right, yeah. Like he also worked on Bonnie and Clyde and Kramer versus Kramer and Superman. Yeah.
Because he wrote Bonnie and Clyde and and Superman and Nobody's Fool, and then strangely the Ice Harvest, I believe.
Yeah, that's a little bit that feels off-brand for him, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of those that he had a big hand in seminal movies from the late 60s and throughout the 70s. I think he did What's Up, Doc, I want to say.
Really? Wow.
I don't know why that's sticking out.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, sorry, I'm looking it up now. Yeah, Robert Benton. He wrote the screenplay for that. That's incredible. What a career.
Don't ask me how this stuff is shuffled in my mind, but it's shuffled in my mind. 10 years from now, somebody will be talking about something, and I'll be like, oh my God, this guy reminds me of Craig from Belle and the Beast.
I'm sorry that has to be in your head.
I hope that never happens to you.
It will. I will be having a conversation, and something will happen, and I will contact Scott, and I'll say, God damn it, I just thought about Craig. And he'll be like, Craig, do we know a Craig?
I'm not going to remember. There's no way.
Craig from Belle and the Beast, and you'll be like, are you talking of Beauty and the Beast? And I'm like, no, the movie we saw. He won't remember. You won't remember next year, I guarantee you.
You're probably right. I watch a lot of movies. I can't remember them all.
That's good. I mean, if you have to erase one from your brain, I feel like this isn't a bad one to do that with.
Yeah. These are like Phantom Zone for me is kind of like cramming for a test where I just like get all the stuff I remember, and then as soon as it's over, gone.
You're done. Yeah, gone.
Oh, hey, Scott, I see what's wrong with your cramming for the test. You've actually got the formula wrong here. If you want me to show you how to...
I see what you did there.
Yep. But yeah, no, but that's why I wanted to have that conversation with it, because it's interesting for something like, because for something like Belle and the Beast, you can tell that there was something that they wanted to do and that they were almost scared of doing it.
Right.
And by doing that is almost worse than making something that's like too preachy. But at the same time, they wanted to make something that it felt like in a way would be accessible to like mainstream audiences, but because they couldn't decide either way. And so that's why I wanted to draw attention to movies that are on both sides, because there's plenty and plenty of super preachy movies that you can see and be like, I don't really like this. But then you do have many mainstream movies that are being made for major audiences that have the money, have the budget, but don't have that preachy factor, you know, because I think that's what turns some people off. Or maybe it's me. Scott, you can jump in. Abby, you can jump in on this. But the one that sticks in my mind recently is the what's it called? The Jennifer Garner one.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but
Heaven is for Real?
No, I'm not thinking of the Greg Kinnear one. It's the other one, the one where her daughter falls from the. Oh. Her daughter's gonna die and she falls from a tree.
That's right. I can't remember the name of that either.
And I think it might be like Miracles Are Real or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But then like the rest of the trailer seems
Miracles
like really
from Heaven.
preachy.
Miracles from Heaven.
There.
Yeah.
But it's like it all of a sudden in the trailer it becomes like super preachy, and it's like, okay, you're trying to mar it, but you're not doing the right way. You're taking the plot and everything that you would have of the super preachy movie that's going to end up having Kevin Sorbo, but you've switched out Kevin Sorbo with Jennifer Garner because you know that people like her more. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really that's not how you're going to win over the audience, because they're still going to see the preachy factor and they're going to be like, let's wait.
A recent movie that really towed the line for me on that very hard was Hacksaw Ridge. I thought kind of leaned into that, especially in the first half, like very closely, to a point where I was like, you could probably market this as a Christian movie, like before it got to the part where everybody blew up. But like
that was such a weird
before
movie.
The violent part. Yeah.
We hate violence, but let's revel in guts and blood.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I get that that's a particularly powerful thing. Like I know a lot of people at Sojourners who have like mentioned Desmond Doss by name as like a person that they respect greatly. And I mean, I do too. I think his story is wonderful. But in that particular instance, it's like you have a character whose faith is rock solid. It's never questioned. At one point, I think he's even lit from behind so that he looks like a saint. And it's just like, this guy can do no wrong. And that, for me,
he's got the guy on his shoulders.
It doesn't make good faith-influenced art at all, because you're not asked to question or challenge, and it doesn't really reflect the way that people's faith lives actually are, which is full of doubt and ups and downs all the time.
Yeah.
So, like, whereas something like Silence actually talks about, like, the profound doubt that people go through in moments of, actual tribulation.
See, that brings about a great counterpoint, because, thank you, by the way, for mentioning Hacksaw Ridge, because this gets into a great point. Because Hacksaw Ridge, of course, is directed by who?
Mel Gibson.
Good old Mel.
Mel Gibson. And, of course, what's the other religious movie that Mel Gibson did?
Passion of the Christ.
And almost in a way would be interesting to, and I'd have to find, like, I'm not sure if he would actually admit it in like an interview, so I'd want to see, but he knew making Passion of the Christ the way that he did was going to connect with Christian audiences.
Right.
He knew it was. He knew that it was, that he could be as bloody and as graphic as he wanted. And while some people would shy away from it, they'd be taking children and family members of all ages because of its connection to the Bible.
Right.
And the struggle of Christ. And sure enough, it did, and that's why it made so much money. And it almost felt like, in telling the story of Desmond Doss, and because of the fact that it's tied into a war theme, that he felt that he could do the same. That because he's showing how great the individual is and how inspiring their story is, and because he does have that faith background, that he could get away with showing the violence, because in a way he may have thought that that's what the audience is connected with. What was the comparison of having the strong faith and then having the blood and guts. I know that might sound weird, but in a mind like Mel Gibson, he might make that connection.
Yeah, I can totally see how those things would get melded together for him. Like, it worked once, why not work again? But it's a totally different context.
Yeah. Well, and like on one hand, I kind of see, like, if the point of the film is to show how terrible and awful violence is, being brutal with how you show that makes a certain amount of sense.
Sure.
But the problem with is that the movie, the way it's shot, just really revels in it. Like, it's not just showing the brutality of it. It's loving it. Like, I remember the scene where the guy picks up the torso of the dead guy and uses it as a shield as he's rushing forward and, like, machine gunning down people. And it's just like, Mel, what are you doing?
Yeah, like, it's completely over the top. And, like, I think also a lot of the stuff that happens in that, at least in the first battle scene, really all the battle scenes, is that it happens so fast that it doesn't really have time to register. And, like, that you should be feeling terrible about all these people that are dying. And you do. Like, it's sickening to watch all that stuff happening at the same time. But it's also just so overwhelming that it's kind of numbing at the same time, which is also actually kind of how I felt about Passion of the Christ, that it reveled so much in, like, the gory aspects of it that it didn't move me anymore after a certain point.
I agree, yeah.
Now, Scott, I have to apologize to you, because I think I think this hits upon a great point, and it's something that we discussed in an early episode, and that's why I'm apologizing to you. But I think with Mel Gibson, given his background, the films that he's made, and the fact that this did have the war background side of it, that when certain people are making movies that are based off of true events that have the war background, that when they're making it, they feel like they have a responsibility to be as graphic as they can to show how terrible it was. But they almost revel in it, in a sense that they go overboard. And the reason this sticks in my mind, and Scott, I think you know where I'm going, so I apologize, is USS Indianapolis. And it's a terrible movie, Abby, that we covered months ago, that was kind of wanting to do in a way like Hacksaw Ridge, where, here's this thing that happened, and here's this terrible story, but then there's good that came out of it. But they didn't have any of the budget of that movie, and they're like, well, but we have the incredible story, and there's these people who are trying to survive, and sharks are eating them. So we have to try to get as graphic as we can, even though we don't have any money, but we still have to have geysers of blood and people holding body parts and everything, because we have to do justice to the atrocities of war. And it almost feels like, in a way, when they get this in their mind, that they're like, I have a duty and I have a responsibility, so I have to go this far. But it almost feels like in doing so, they get lost in like the shuffle of what's important to it. And in a way that it feels like, because he does want the story to be about Desmond, and he does have it for a large period of time, but then he's like, but we also need to take 10 minutes just to have a whole bunch of people die,
right?
And not necessarily pay attention to this character. And we're going to spend a lot of time with Vince Vaughn doing the worst R. Lee Ermey impression that we can have, because it's a war movie and because this is a real person.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and I remember when I wrote this up for my review for Sojourners, and I mentioned the kind of eventual, like, overwhelming and numbingness of the violence. Somebody mentioned, well, that's what war's really like, and I was like, well, yeah, you're right, but that doesn't mean that it translates well to cinema. It's not. Yeah. It's an art form thing, really. And I think regardless of how true you're wanting to be to the subject matter, you also have to think about it in terms of what people can actually take in, and what people can actually withstand and what they're willing to withstand. And I think there's a line there, and I think Mel Gibson definitely goes over it. Like, I can think of other movies that do the same thing. Like any movie that has to do with the rape of Nanking, I think like it feels like you can't. I know that sounds really specific, but there's this one in particular, Zhang Yimou's movie, The Flowers of War, which is just like, it's just guilt porn, basically, after a certain point. And like, you can't watch it. Like, it gets to a point where you can't watch it. And at that point, like, what is your movie even for, really?
Why is that sticking out of my mind? Is Flowers of War the one that has Christian Bale?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. That's I skipped that one because of it.
Don't watch it.
I love the director. I love everything that he does.
Yeah, he's the best.
But yeah, because I remember when I heard that Christian Bale was going to be in there and what it was about, and I was like, no, that's a movie that's like, do you feel sad yet? We want you to feel sad. Are you feeling sad yet? No, tell me, because once you feel sad, I'm going to make you feel more sad.
Yeah, and I mean, Zhang Yimou can do that. Like, I mean, To Live is a great movie that does exactly that, but it's also way more personal. It's not just like people being brutally killed all the time.
Yeah, that's it. But I mean, it's I don't know, but it's a fine point in there, and it's I guess it shows how rare it is to have, or nowadays to have, a mainstream movie that does have characters of faith and have a discussion of faith without it tipping in one direction or the other.
Good job reining that back in. That kind of went far afield, but yes, I agree.
Well, no, but I mean, it does. Hacksaw Ridge is, it's a very current movie, so, and that is the backbone of it, and so it does fit into it.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the Mary Magdalene movie this year, which is sure to piss a bunch of people off.
Yeah, I'm very interested in watching that. Yeah.
It's okay. There'll be a completely opposite version that'll come out in like 2 theaters. That's like, no, this is the cheery version.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Here you go. We have pop-up
story.
books to go with it. That person doesn't know what they're talking about, but in much harsher tones.
Yeah, exactly. Mary Magdalene was just a friend of Jesus. Let's explore that, shall we?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Well, Abby, where can the nice people find you on the internet?
The nice people can find me on Twitter. I tweet at IndieAbby, IndieAbby 88. And that's a pretty good place to keep up with all the different spots that I'm writing for. I do write mainly for Sojourners. I do some stuff occasionally for Birth Movies Death and some stuff occasionally for Think Christian. In fact, if you want to read more about my thoughts on Judas, I had a piece go up there recently about that comic and also about Jason Aaron's The Goddamned.
Very nice. Is there anything upcoming that you want to point people towards or keep an eye out for?
I don't think so. That's the article I did for Think Christian is the most recent thing that I've done. I'm not currently working on anything else, but it's also January when things get really slow. So I imagine stuff will be picking up again soon. Yeah.
Things are slow right now. Scott, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at ScottDaily85. That's DAOY. And you can see all the other podcasts I do, all the 5 podcasts that Adrian was making fun of me for over at dailyplanetfilms.com.
Awesome. That's exciting. Do you have anything that you want to put out there that you want people to keep an eye out?
Yeah, I mean, like, we can plug my show with my wife again. I started a new show with my wife called Vow to View, where we force each other to watch the movies that were important to us as kids.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I want to listen to that now.
Yeah. This week I made her watch Starship Troopers, and she made me watch Gone with the Wind.
That's awesome.
Okay, you mentioned what she had you watch, or what you had her watch last week, but you didn't. Oh, you mentioned Music Man. So She's having you watch older movies, and you're having her watch movies that she probably doesn't want to watch ever.
It depends.
Because no. Okay, we'll get Abby's view on this quickly.
Okay.
So he mentioned on the last episode that his wife had him watch Music Man, and he had her watch Gattaca. This time, she had him watch Gone with the Wind, and he had her watch. Oh, now I even
Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers.
I mean, I'm an omnivore, so I'm all over all those movies. I think that's great.
So I think the reason for it is when she was a kid, her parents always rented classic films and made the kids sit down and watch the classics. Whereas when I was a kid, I had father-son bonding day when we went and saw the latest sci-fi movie that came out. So
fantastic! Yeah.
I can tell that because your next movie is going to be because you're going forward in a weird way. So the next movie you're going to choose is going to be from 2007, and that's a sci-fi movie, and she's going to choose something from 1962. That's a musical and a worthwhile and good film. And I'm not saying that your movies aren't worthwhile and good films because I like those movies. I'm just saying she's going with Music Man and Gone with the Wind, so she's choosing slightly more highfalutin options
Adrian,
than you right now.
Next week on the podcast, she chose You Got Mail, and I chose High Fidelity. So
those are both good.
Yeah.
That's got a pedigree. You've got your Nora Ephron and your Nick Hornby, and who directed that? Was that Stephen Daldry did that?
I can't remember. I think you're right.
Or which one?
High Fidelity.
Was it Fears?
Frears, yes. I
That
get
was
Daldry and
Frears.
Frears
Yeah,
confused
yeah.
all the time. Daldry did Billy Elliot.
I'm going to say on principle that I'm disappointed in your wife because she should have technically chosen Shop Around the Corner.
Well, we have. I think we have reasons for the movies we picked this week specifically that we're going to get into on next week's podcast. So you'll have to tune in to find those out.
Oh, I look forward to hearing that. That sounds great.
You didn't appreciate my joke, Scott.
I didn't get your joke, Adrian. It's not that I didn't appreciate it. I didn't get it.
What Shop Around the Corner is the movie that technically You've Got Mail is an adaptation of.
See, I didn't know that.
It fits with the older film.
Well, now I get your joke. It was
way
great.
that she was going.
Great job.
Abby got it, so
I did. Yeah. It's a great movie. You should watch it.
It is. It's really good. They actually reference it in You Got Mail.
That's right, because Meg Ryan's bookstore is named The Shop Around the Corner.
Clever.
Yes, very.
for late 90s rom-coms, yeah, it is. You can find me online at Yo Adrian Torres on Twitter. My writing, of course, is going up on Boom Howdy all the time. There's going to be several reviews in the next couple weeks or at the end of the month, since we do have Panic Fest coming up. If you are in the Kansas City area for Panic Fest, definitely check out panicfest.com because they do have the entire schedule of movies that they're playing. There's several movies that they're going to be playing at the festival that are going to be playing later in the week. And I mentioned that because there's a movie that I had kind of been talking about off and on for a bit that I can officially announce will be at the festival, and that's Tigers Are Not Afraid. And it's going to get
movie.
Oh, it's so good. It's going to get a second showing because the first night that it plays, which is on Saturday, the very end of the movie is going to cross over with when they're doing the Movie Crypt podcast. So they're going to have another showing of it on either Tuesday or Wednesday in the week, so that all the people who went to the podcast will still get to see it. And I will actually be doing an intro for it when it plays on Saturday because they know how much I enjoyed the movie and how much it made me tear up.
Oh wow, that's really exciting. That's the Issa Lopez movie, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So if I can plug a different podcast that is not related at all to anything that I do, but April Wolf's podcast, Switchblade Sisters. She had Issa Lopez on a few weeks ago talking about Pan's Labyrinth, I think. So the whole point of that podcast is that she has female filmmakers on to talk about their favorite genre movies. And the conversation that she has with Issa Lopez is really, really good.
I haven't listened to it at all, but her drop in Del Toro is completely apparent. Because if I could schedule a double feature, and have one of the movies be Tiger's Not Afraid, the movie that I would pair with it would be The Devil's Backbone.
Oh, fantastic! That sounds so great.
They're very much of the same ilk. So yeah, definitely keep your eye open. I totally suggest to you, because I think you would really, really like Tigers Are Not Afraid. Scott, did you cry when you saw it?
I got close, but it's a rough. It's a wonderful movie. It's beautiful, but yeah, it's pretty sad.
Would you agree with the slight comparison with pairing it with Devil's Backbone? Is this where you say that you have not seen The Devil's Backbone?
No, I have. I'm just thinking. Yeah, I could see that.
Good. I just want to make sure. Otherwise, we'd have to end the friendship. So
Sorry.
Wanted to double check.
You're done. Podcast over.
The review that I have that'll be going up sometime within the next several hours, or when you're hearing this, it may be up, is for Paddington 2, which go see it. Everybody's going to think that I am completely insane, but it is so good. It is better than the original film. It is just absolutely winsome and enjoyable, and everything about it from the filmmaking standpoint is basically perfect. Like, all the performances are great, and they totally buy into the world that they're presenting. There's several setups for scenes that when it begins, you're like, oh, they're going to do this chintzy little thing. And then it wins you over. There's a part where he's going to be washing windows, and you're like, oh, of course something's going to happen. He's going to fall and blah, blah, blah. And then it wins you over, and you're like, that's good filmmaking right there. If you can tell that this is a tried and true but old and trite setup to something, and then it wins you over, it speaks to the magic of the filmmaking. And I mentioned in my review, and it sounds completely insane, but I think this may be Hugh Grant's best performance. And it's because he is dialed in, and he is having so much fun. And because of how much fun that he's having, he brings this character to life in a great sort of way, in the type of way that you don't really get in any of these films nowadays. And even though he is the villain of the movie, one of the things that makes the Paddington movie special is the people who are thieves or bad guys or criminals aren't doing so because they're evil. They're doing so because of basically like family history, and it gets, even if it's just a few minutes or so, it gets to the humanity of those characters. And by allowing children who are seeing these movies to understand like the psychology of the person who's bad, and realizing that no, they're not, these people aren't entirely bad, I think is a very interesting view, because you'll always have, the criminals like in the Home Alone people that they're just thieves and they're mean and they want to kill these people or whatever. And in these movies, they have people who are trying to do things that make them look bad, but the reasons that they're doing them is to usually try to fulfill a form of family legacy, which humanizes them. And in a children's movie, that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm excited to see it.
It's so good. It's so fun. I mean, it's weird to, as an adult, to be talking about a movie that's about a anthropomorphic bear.
Uh-huh.
And it's a delightful. The best comparison that I can make for anybody who is an adult walking into it, that'll kind of give you a feeling if it's something that you want to see or not, is that the best cross section is the Muppets movie from, what was that, 2011, 2013? That Grand Budapest Hotel and Amelie.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a recipe for charming.
Exactly.
It's great.
So I highly suggest everybody go see it. That's all I can say. Abby, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on to this, because this was great. We went a lot longer than we normally do, but I think we got to have a big conversation about a wide types of films, and not only the thing that I want to say that's important at the end of this episode is there was somebody who I follow on Twitter that I've talked to a whole bunch of times who came out. It wasn't directed towards me at all. It just got me to think about stuff. But he mentioned that he'd been asked by several people if they would come on to their podcast and talk about bad movies. And he said, I don't want to do that because I want to be positive about movies. And I felt bad for a moment because I'm like, am I doing a bad thing with the podcast that I'm doing? And then I researched the podcast that he didn't mention, but I ended up finding out what they were. And I was like, I don't feel as bad because the majority of the other podcasts are they're A, trying to be mean, and B, they're not trying to have a discussion about how these movies fall into their traps or how these movies could be made better. Mm-hmm. And that Scott's heard me rail against, what is it, Bad Movie Night or whatever that Red Letter Media does.
Best of the Worst, I think. Or
Best something. Of the Worst, where it's an 45-minute to an hour-long thing where they have 3 movies where they're barely touching on like the concept of the movie, and they're just making fun of the things that are on there. And I was thinking about it. I was listening to a couple of episodes, and I was like, okay, there are things that we're clearly making fun of in these movies, but we are getting to a deeper discussion of why these elements are problems. And so that's why I wanted to thank you for having this discussion where we dug into the differences with all these different types of religious movies and the ones that work and what causes some of them not to work. Because I think that adds more to the discussion instead of just, oh, we're making fun of a movie.
Yeah, it was great. And I thank you for having me on and inviting me to have a broader discussion with you. I had a great time.
And then next time we'll end up, doing Slamma Jamma with you, and we might accidentally make fun of that the whole time. So
that's perfectly fine. I'm on board for that.
Sometimes you just gotta.
It's the law of averages, basically. So, you know what, everybody? It's the winter. It's cold outside still. Try to be nice to everybody and make the world a little bit warmer. Until next time.
I don't need no predictions. I don't listen to fate. I'm a cold soul survivor. I've been known not to wait. In a land of confusion, no one's ready to face. If it's love that you're after, then you're in the wrong place, baby. So